Freeman, Brian Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority. 105.9 FM, AM 630, WMAL.
6:37 on a Friday morning here in Washington, D.C. Former UN Ambassador John Bolton is with us. Mr. Ambassador, good to have you back on.
Well, thanks for having me.
We've talked to you several times over the last couple of months, and you've been saying that, hey, you were seriously considering to run for president. You're not going to do it now. I'm just curious, I don't know if you saw last night's debate, but do you think that national security issues have played enough of a role in the topic, at least, when it comes to questions for the Republican candidates?
Well, nowhere near enough, and last night was a little bit better. I'm glad my colleagues at Fox were able to get a few questions in there, but it's just not enough. And these debates, frankly, are not the way to get a serious discussion of the issue. I mean, but just to give an example, everybody's concerned about the economy. I understand that. It's very important. It's probably the top issue. No dispute from me on that. But, one of the reasons our economy is in trouble is because of what's happening in Europe. And it was pretty hard to find any of the questioners asking about the implications. You can talk about jobs programs or cutting federal spending here. Watching Europe collapse is not fun, and yet nobody was asked, what would you do as president? I don't mean that. I mean, I certainly wouldn't come to Europe's aid. I think they've made this mess themselves. But what about the implications of that? And the discussion just gets lost.
Or even why Europe is failing, too, which would be interesting.
Exactly.
You said recently that, UN approval for a Palestinian state, which is obviously hot and heavy in the news these days, is a fantasy effort. Explain your rationale for that.
The UN General Assembly has no authority to create states or recognize states. The UN General Assembly today could vote to make Disneyland a state, and it will have as much impact in the real world as if it votes Palestine to be a state. This is an effort by the Palestinian Authority to create facts on the ground in the Middle East here in New York at the United Nations. And we could have put this thing to rest months and months ago if President Obama, had been decisive. In fact, I attribute a lot of the problem to his statement last year, trying to prejudge how the negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians would work out. I really think this is a clear example of political and diplomatic incompetence on the part of the administration. Now, they're scrambling around this past couple of weeks, desperately trying to avoid a debacle up here, and they may succeed in putting it off. But the whole thing was utterly unnecessary. It's not conducive to the Middle East peace process. You could end up with a lose all the way around. Israel loses, the Palestinians lose, the U.S. loses. It's just unbelievable.
Ambassador Bolton, are you officially advising Rick Perry on foreign policy? Are you officially advising anyone or planning to?
No, I'm not. Politico had some kind of little blurb yesterday, and I sent him an email that I thought was pretty clear that I wasn't. But of course, once the mainstream media or even the blogs get an idea,
right,
by God, they're going to pursue it. They don't care about the facts. That may be the last time I answer a question from Politico.
Do you think eventually you would sign on to a campaign to advise?
Well, I don't know. For exactly the reasons we've been talking about,
right,
I'm still trying to figure out a way to raise the saliency of national security issues, and I thought originally maybe running for president was the way to do that. I don't think that was going to work, but it leaves me in the same dilemma that I've been in. I don't know what else to do, and I'm distressed by it because, we're electing a president. We're in the process to elect a president who will be in office from January of 2013 to January of 2017. This is 2011, and if we don't get a feeling for what some of the candidates think, how they reason, not that you can talk about the specific issues they're going to address in 2015, but we want to know what their thinking is. We want to know their thought process, and honestly, we're just not getting it at this point.
Mr. Ambassador, I want to get you to weigh in on this just unbelievable speech that was given on the floor of the United Nations by Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, in which he lays the woes of the world at the feet of the United States and goes through in just an incredible way to suggest that we are sort of the evil force in the world, responsible for all the horrible things that ever happened. And he makes the point about slavery and all that, and then goes through a list of questions about all the things that, who is responsible, including he apparently believes that we are responsible for starting World War II I guess he thought that Adolf Hitler was just a grand guy and paid no attention to the fact that we were attacked at Pearl Harbor. Would you weigh in on this speech and what it means?
Well, he is a fruitcake. There's no doubt about it. And the only silver lining in this whole performance is that the rest of the world gets to see him completely unvarnished. I thought maybe this time he was going to come to New York, that his PR advisors had really moved into the big leagues. They released those 2 American hikers who never should have been held in the first place. They were made into political pawns, but they were released the day before Ahmadinejad's speech, and so I thought this was part of the charm offensive, and then of course he opens his mouth and away it goes.
And by the way, this is the same guy that NBC goes over to Iran and does just the most incredible puff piece about how Ahmadinejad gets up and works out every morning and goes jogging.
Great jogger.
It's astonishing to me that this guy gets any attention or credibility in the world.
You're exactly right. It's also astonishing that the Obama administration clearly still thinks that they can negotiate with him. If you look at our president's speech the day before, Iran gets only a passing mention, about a sentence and a half, on its repression of its own people and its continued pursuit of nuclear weapons, real threats to peace and security in the Middle East. And just gets passed by. And the reason is the president doesn't want to offend them any more than he has to, because he still thinks he can negotiate with him. That's another fantasy.
Well, Ambassador John Bolton, always good to have you here on the Morning Majority.
Well, thanks again. Always